So, at the start, it might be interesting for me is like you think about the TOC, what we're doing technically with the platform, et cetera. Like, if you could share like where your perspective on what the priorities kind of come from, like what's top of mind for you, and like where you think as a community we should focus. Like that would be a great, I think, opening context if you all feel comfortable with talking about that.
Stephan.
Okay. I see actually two aspects.
Yeah.
First of all, the community. And the most important thing is to have the community open, to allow, let's say, interested people to join it, to join the working groups, to find the working groups, first of all. I remember back then when we started to work or try to approach CAPI because of some performance problems back then for our deployments. It was difficult to find the right contacts, and that has improved. And I think here we should try to be as open as possible and to invite and to be approachable and have the doors open. That's the organizational aspect. From a technical point of view, well, it's Cloud Foundry. It's a boring machinery. It just has to work. And that's my top priority. Just make it work and work and work. So security gets the library updates. Then comes performance, especially I'm, let's say, more interested in Cloud Controller, which has room for improvement here and there as well.
Yeah.
And then comes a lot nothing, and then comes features, from my point of view.
I really like your comment about it just works. Paul Moritz, who was the person I would give credit to creating the whole idea of Cloud Foundry, he would give up and give talks that say, like, our job as infrastructure is to be boring and invisible. And I think Cloud Foundry has succeeded to some extent at becoming, like, for a lot of organizations, like the black box that just runs the app. So I think that's a great topic and priority.
Yeah, I fully support what Stephan mentioned. We did a lot of work to make the onboarding of the community experience much user-friendly and transparent. So we have our automations which are managing our Cloud Foundry GitHub organization. We also invest into have everything declared in our community repository and have automations which clean up manually added users, for example, or inactive users. So this is, I think, the baseline to have to build on that, so to build a community. And we also own or manage the change process, the RFCs, which are the way how we introduce bigger changes into the platform. And we try to be most responsive there to help people to also, from our side, we create also sometimes RFCs to when we see need to change. I'm excited about the topic we are looking into to integrate the cloud native build packs into the platform, because they are here since quite a long time, and people are really interested in the cloud native build packs. It will be great if we have a good integration into the platform. And also I've been looking into one topic to how binding information is provided to the services. We have some issues there, and we want to introduce the way how Kubernetes does this also to the platform, to Cloud Foundry. And also excited what Kurifi does, this introduction of managed services, the API gateway support, or the UA compatibility. Yeah, a lot of awesome stuff, I think, is happening.
Yeah, that's exciting, and I would just share, my perspective is that some of those fundamental contracts, like building and binding, like those are left to the user in a lot of other ways of doing cloud computing. And some of our largest, most successful deployments that I've seen, they really enjoy introducing that as like an organizational boundary, right? Like, okay, there's the contract for building a container, here's the contract for how you bind and access services in a very formalized way. Whereas some other organizations I talk to, that they'll say, hey, we have all these automation scripts sitting here. Can you help us like make sure it does some of the things that build and bind do? So I think that's great to keep doubling down on that. And for me, it's like an open question of how do you bring that kind of contractual promise to more and more cloud computing platforms, because I think the world could benefit from that. So that's very exciting.
Yeah. Maybe I'll do a little introduction. My name's Amelia. What did I do? I've been an R&D engineer. Where am I pointing? Here we go. I've been an R&D engineer on Cloud Foundry since 2016. So when I interact with our users the most is when something has gone wrong, support has tried to help them, support couldn't help them, it's been escalated to me, I get on a Zoom with 20 angry customers, and so that's usually when I interact with our users. And so I always love coming to conferences like this where I get to hear the good stories, so it's good for me. But because of that background, what I care about is the stability, the making it boring, the keeping, like my personal passion project, if you know me, is keeping Go up to date, but making sure that all of the changes that Go puts in, all those little things that sound, like it might not change anyone, that actually affect people, won't break our users. And so trying to make everything just work under the hood. So the stability, making sure everything's HA, and that nothing surprises our users is always where I'm focused.
Yeah, that's a great topic. And for me, I see some of those escalations from, our at scale users. And, one thing that comes up is like, oh, hey, I have this 700 VM deployment of Cloud Foundry running 50,000 containers, and it's taking it longer to update. But what I've noticed, I think it's really good work, to focus on for us, because other platforms, they say like, oh, we just haven't upgraded it in 3 years. And so it's always been like this quandary for me. They're like, oh, well, I had an upgrade problem with Cloud Foundry. I was like, but you had an upgrade. So I think that's good work, and continuing to make it boring. Boy, I just feel like that's really a great thing to do as a community, is make it boring for other people to succeed. So, looking forward, any advice of someone, since we talk about contributors and community, any advice for someone who's just curious about Cloud Foundry today, wants to make a small contribution or get started? Like, what part of it would you look at if you wanted to evangelize? Just like, it's a big piece of code, right? So, any tips for anyone that wanted to, kind of become a contributor? Tough question, so it can be a short answer.
Maybe I'll give a little history, right? So before the current governing model with the TOC and the working groups, the way it was, we used to have a dojo model. Maybe some of us remembered. Who here went through a dojo? Yeah. And you all traveled. You had to travel to San Francisco, right? And how many weeks were you in San Francisco for? 6 weeks. This sounds very accessible, right? Anyone can do this.
I remember this era very well.
Yes, and it was fun. We loved having you in the office. But maybe not the most accessible. And so now with our current governing model, in the bylaws, it's listed out how do you work your way up to becoming a Cloud Foundry general contributor, to a reviewer, to an approver with right access.
Yeah.
And so it really is open to more people today than it has been in the past, which is great. But yes, it is a massive, massive piece of software. Where do you start?
Yeah.
I got my start on Cappy, was the cloud controller. Some Ruby code, I found that easier to start in. So that's Stephan's area.
Yeah, I don't know if Ruby code makes it easy to start with. It's actually
Sorry to
not
ask
my
a tough question early in the morning, just in the spirit of community.
Yeah, it's not my favorite programming language, but it is one.
Maybe documentation is also one thing which is easy to get in, update documentation.
Yeah, I would say the first thing is just join the Cloud Foundry organization, become a contributor. That's the first PR, actually. You do, that means you have found the community project where the documentation is written. You sign the CLA, and then another point is opening a bug, because usually if you want to contribute something, it usually starts with an issue, right? Something doesn't work. That's where I would start. Coding comes later.
And also we have these working groups, and they have also their own meetings. It's a good opportunity to ask questions. So if you want to contribute to get feedback, what is actually a good fit to contribute.
Yeah.
And I know my colleague Mark Paquette is here somewhere. Oh, there he is. And he has recently become an approver in many areas in my working group. And he's giving a little lightning talk on that process today.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
throw out to Mark.
Are you all up for like an industry question? Is that okay?
Yep.
So I've been very curious about this level of abstraction we should all be using to get our work done in cloud. Like that's a very, it's kind of a cool question. And there have been recent moves in the cloud market. Like Azure has introduced Azure Container Apps, which is sort of a little bit of simplified contract to consume a container application. And I've seen a lot of my friends that work at Google Cloud actually leading with Cloud Run now. And I wonder if there isn't like this sine wave of experimentation we've been going through as a community on like, what is the right contract between the platform operations, focus and the kind of app operations, app deployment focus. I know when I've been chatting with our largest Cloud Foundry users about that, they're all kind of paying attention, and some of them have noticed that same tension in their own organization. So any industry observations that anyone would like to share?
At SAP, I am working for SAP.
Yeah.
I also have contact with internal stakeholders of our cloud offering. And usually I don't get the abstraction, questioning the abstraction which Cloud Foundry provides.
So they're content with it.
Yeah, but most of the time use cases just fit or they just doesn't fit. So you get use cases which just doesn't fit to Cloud Foundry, and you say, if you have, for example, you need more control over everything, for example, you need to improve until the last performance option you have, you go for another option, or you just care about your code and you just want to run that. Yeah, it's most of the time, I think the use case defines what you where to go. You have to think through carefully what kind of also experience the developers have. It's also one point which is important. Yeah.
Makes sense. Any other quick comments? You're trying to keep it as boring as possible for people, so sometimes I find higher abstraction helps keep it more boring because there's less variables that you have to compute in your own head when you think about changing it. But
I think for an application developer, Cloud Foundry brings a very good and high-level abstraction because you care for your application, right? You don't care about the configuration of, let's say, for a Java application for your Tomcat in all the little details, but you should. If it is supposed to run under high load, you don't have to care about the operating system, about the regular updates. That all works out of the box. And let's say there are customers which actually need that because they don't even know that there's an operating system below your application that has to be updated, that has to be secured, etc. And they only find out that this problem exists when the next step comes, next stack comes out, and the old one gets deprecated and doesn't receive any updates anymore. And you announce that it is going to be removed one day, which you can't because customers are still using it. And containers, if you manage your own CI pipeline, if you have the knowledge, all fine, all good. But my observation is that that's not the case for every single customer, for good or for bad.
Yeah, just thinking about myself when I was at my first job out of college, a little junior engineer trying to ramp up on the Ember app that we were deploying. It's like, I have to learn this and how to be an engineer, in the real workplace, and I have to be an infrastructure expert and learn this. Like, I wish I had something with as nice guardrails as Cloud Foundry, and I could have CF pushed back then.
Yeah.
So, for the ease of use right away, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, and the mention about the operating system is an interesting one to me. I talk to a lot of kind of cloud app users, and they're all trying to chase down that operating system update with kind of like a DevSecOps tool. So they're like scanning and alerting and then escalating in some ways. And I think kind of like the contract between, you know, the build, the bind, and the BOSH, right? It really manages a lot of that infrastructure for you. And I wonder if there's things we can do as a community to bring that ethos of continuous update with contracts to kind of like the broader market. Because I think sometimes people get very interested in the component level versus the outcome level. But that's just maybe a personal thing for me. You know, one question I might have is like, what are you hearing from your organization? Like, what do they want more from in terms of the investments you're making in Cloud Foundry? Like maybe SAP could go first. Like, are there priorities that, you know, your internal stakeholders have asked for?
Yeah, the cloud native build packs is one topic. Yeah, we've been working into introducing an option to have configuration on routing application per application route, so to say. For example, I'm hearing often that people want to configure their own routing algorithm for the application because it's now global. What else? Yeah, most probably in this build pack and routing. Yeah, and often I hear also better support for container-to-container communication because the current container-to-container approach has some issues, scaling issues, and also if you use that one, it's sometimes hard to debug to find out what doesn't work. When it works, it's fine, but when it doesn't work, it's yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited about the per route features. That is being led by SAP, by Max Moho and Dominic Froelich, I think, put in the RFC for it. That's the area I care a lot about. And so,
tell us more about it.
Yeah.
I love the energy, so like now I'm really curious.
Well, there's a few things like load balancing algorithms. Do you want round robin? Do you want least connection? What are your connection limits? What is your session cookie name? These boring things that are set on a foundation level or a platform level right now that the operator is deciding. And it's like, operator doesn't know what the app dev wants, and they're having to make these decisions for the app dev. The app dev wants to make this decision.
Yeah.
And so Max and Dominique put together this proposal about how these can be exposed on a per route basis, and not just these particular ones that I've called out, but like other ones in the future. So we're not doing them as one-offs, we'll be doing it, here's the new structure, the new way of doing this so that as more requests come in, we can add them easier.
That's interesting. The original architect of the cloud controller, Derek Collison, was running APIs at Google, and he had run really big APIs. And there was a debate one day, and he was like, "We will only do random." he's like, "I have tried to get smarter than the traffic 100 times, and I'm not." So it's like one of those sine waves again, where Derek was like, his experience at mega scale was very much random, was the only thing he could, count on. But I think that there are a lot of circumstances where developers have a particular app, and that might make a lot of sense. But I can literally see Derek standing there, like kind of pounding on the table about, I'm only smart enough for random. That was a quote from the creator of the cloud controller.
Also, the readiness health checks was a really good addition. Yeah.
Maybe you want to say a little bit more about readiness and health checks? I mean, that's something I see, I hear a lot of complaints about in the broader community. Like I hear a lot of people saying, hey, we let our developers configure containers however they wanted. And readiness, health checking, and scheduling are areas where they have outages. So I wonder if there's anything more we could do to package I see Greg nodding. There's just a certain number of talk tracks that when I talk to a large organization doing containers in the cloud, I'm like, okay, that's hit number 7's coming in, readiness and health checking.
But not too much. Maria's giving a talk on it later.
Yeah, okay. So there are users, they want just to move the on-premise application to the cloud, and they have then issues with startup times, and they were complaining that the container gets killed at some point, it's still, and it's a good addition that we have now option for those applications to take their time to set up what they need to be set up, and then, also when application instances are under load, they can decide to take themselves out from the routing, and then when they can accept additional requests, then they can register again to route with the readiness health check. It's really great.
Yeah, I think these are all good examples of like we had strong defaults to start, and now we're learning what the dials that we need to expose are, without just saying good luck to users as well.
I think another feature request is to overcome the limits of VCAP services, the amount. So there's a 130K limit, and with the recent more usage of MTLS between service communication, the binding information grows and grows. So we've seen several 10Ks of binding information, and then you can do the math, and you end up in just 10 services that you can bind. That's not sufficient for a big application. So here there's an RFC filed by Beyhan that tries to overcome this limit. So that's also an important feature request.
That's excellent. Maybe one last topic, and I think we're kind of close to time. One or two topics. Like for me, is there anything we could think about as a community around scalability? Like one observation I have is that some of our users use it a lot. Like I would say, like it's like not a very common laptop technology for the average developer. But the organizations that are using it, they tend to be like, I'm updating 700 VMs with Cloud Foundry. How can I do that faster? Or I want to run even more applications per foundation. How can I do that? Is there anything you think as a community, and I know that at Broadcom we're talking about investing more in performance engineers. If you look on LinkedIn, Hari Priya, who's one of our engineering leaders, has a performance engineering role now. It's kind of a topic I'm excited about because we have so many scale users. Is there anything related to performance and scale that makes sense for us to chat about here that you've observed?
I have some special concern in the cloud controller.
Yeah.
Because when your foundations grow, of course, the usage of the CF API just has to scale with us. And here we had actually real issues in the past.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff could be improved by just looking at the queries and the database queries. Basically, there were very easy findings that you can reduce the number of round trips to the database, use better joins, optimize it, get rid of some sortings and some distinct and things like that. That's the easy part. It's work, it has to be done. It was done over the last 2-3 years at least, and we have at least gained a factor 2 or 3. That's the one part. But then comes the more heavy lifting, let's say the role concept and the way how service plan visibilities are managed in the cloud controller has room for improvement, to say it politely. And if we want to approach this one, we have to take bigger tools in the hand and do some major refactorings in the database schema. If you want to do that, number one wish of mine would be get rid of CF API v2. So if anybody could help or has ideas how to do it, so we have tried hard in our own landscapes. We have implemented rate limiting specific for v2. There's a feature flag to switch it off completely, but it's difficult to enable it in productive landscapes, right? But that would open the door for substantial improvements, I would say, because doing bigger database migrations with a legacy of v2 in place and with the current v3 API, that's difficult to make it compatible. So, yeah.
Very interesting. I think supporting some of these largest organizations in the world running this abstraction successfully is like, for me, it's an area of technical interest over the next year or two to continue to invest in. And it's something I would feel personally good about, talking to our largest users, like, hey, we're going to make it possible to run even more apps per foundation, because some of our organizations using it are just running so many foundations, it's beyond the original design scope of the project in some ways. Any other thoughts on performance before we maybe
also some guidelines how much you can scale up, scale out, would be also helpful, because at certain point you are reaching limits which are given by the hyperscaler providers, and then you have to stop there. Because, for example, if you consume all the possible connection for a Postgres database, you cannot go any further. You have to somehow stop.
I was going to add that.
I'll give you the last word.
Oh, no. Performance is one of the first areas that I started interacting with SAP over several years ago.
We've been giving those talks about scaling.
Yes, but because at Pivotal VMware Broadcom, we don't run our own foundation anymore. And so, I don't work on a live foundation. I work on our customers' foundations. But at SAP, you all have been running an absolutely massive cloud CF deployment. And so being able to work with them and see exactly where the issues are has been invaluable. And when we were building out container-to-container networking, you really ran us into some great problems that we could fix. And so that just like the open source has really helped, and the collaboration has been great.
Yeah, very, very, very fortunate that SAP has been such a great contributor for a decade now. So, yeah. So this was fun. Did people enjoy a quick chat on this? I think there's a lot of other great topics today that are going to go much deeper on some of these, but this is a little appetizer. I know I'm personally very excited to listen in, the rest of the day and hear what the other things are going on. Any parting words? Any last comments on where we're headed as a community?
If we can improve something in the TOC, please give us feedback. Yeah. We are there.
We're friendly, we swear.
Join the working group meetings and switch off V2.
I hear you on that one. Okay.
Yes, please.